Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Men's Day Out, India's only portal that covers gender stories, but from the other side. Joining with us today is somebody you would have seen on many TV debate shows, Raghav Avasti, who is a lawyer as well as an activist. Thank you, Raghav, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So, Raghav and I are going to discuss about something which I think every Indian family who has a son should be aware of, because mostly what happens is, we take things for granted unless certain issues land on our doorstep. So, we are going to discuss about a very critical topic today, which is Section 498A. What is Section 498A? Basically, it is a law which allows women or wife per se to file a case of cruelty against her husband. She can also include harassment for dowry in the same charge. And just by the mere complaint, the husband and his entire family can be booked and subsequently arrested. Now, Raghav, what I want to understand from you is India is a very complex country with so many cultures and traditions together. In every marriage, and I'm sure not just in India, but across the world, when two peoples get married in a traditional way, there are a lot of exchange of gifts. So let's say, for example, in an Indian marriage, the girl side would probably give a gold chain to the boy. And similarly, maybe a boy is gifting a solitaire to the girl. Now, when things are fine, all this is, counted as gifts, everything goes well. But when things go wrong in a marriage, these are the same items which get listed as dowry. So what is your take on this issue?
Hi. So basically, what I wanted to say was that I just wanted to speak a bit about Section 498A, because I think when you introduced it, there were two or three things that you missed, perhaps. So first is that it's not just restricted to the husband. The wife's family can also ensure that any relatives of the husband are also booked. And secondly, it's not just about dowry. A lot of people think that it's just about dowry. But this section is very clear. It says that if there is any physical or mental cruelty then the man can be booked along with his family. The section doesn't define what mental cruelty is in this context. Earlier, it was very difficult. Earlier, arrest was almost something that used to happen as a matter of course. There were some safeguards that were put in place by the Supreme Court. There was this judgment which was very clear, in as much as it said that first, if there is a complaint of Section 498A, then family counseling should happen first. But that ratio has been watered down a little bit by a judgment authored by Justice Deepak Mishra, wherein he has said that, look, you don't have to arrest, but before you file the FIR, you have to do a lot of due diligence. I mean, those directions are for the cops. So what happens generally in such cases is, these days, that if a complaint is filed, then the matter goes to the concerned crime against women cell. And then the CAW cell, what it does is that it will call both the parties to the station. And then what they do is, I feel that it's quite problematic. They proceed on the assumption that everything which is there in the complaint is correct. And especially for the guy's family, or for the family of the man in question, it's really difficult to go through the rigors of a trial. Most people don't want to do that. And for guys, the consequences are much worse. Per se, I don't have so much of a problem with the wording of the section, except for the fact that I feel that, first of all, it should be gender neutral. But the problem is that our procedure is so bad that the process becomes the punishment. And if you have to go through this trial for, let's say, a decade or so, then first of all, you cannot get married again during that time. And if a complaint has been filed against you, means that your marriage in any case is over. You cannot marry during that time. And then it has a very, very detrimental impact on your mental health and the mental health of the family also. Because in this country, fortunately or unfortunately, people are more intimately involved with their families even when they reach their 30s or 40s. In the West, you are 18 years old, you move out, you see your family on special festivals like Thanksgiving or Christmas. That's not something that happens in India. So I think it's really quite problematic. And then coming back to the question of gifts, yes, gifts are exchanged, but what happens is that when these complaints are filed, and these complaints are these days invariably drafted by a lawyer, and it's also not the lawyer's fault. The lawyer, of course, is going to do his or her job and make sure that he or she gets the best results for whoever their client might be. And then, yes, all these gifts that were voluntarily exchanged are weaponized. There was one particular case that I was dealing with recently in which you had this girl's father who insisted that the boy accept, I think it was a Mercedes or a BMW. I don't remember the exact make of the car, neither is it relevant. And then once the complaint was filed, he weaponized this gift, and then the complaint said that this gift had been obtained via coercion. So thankfully, this guy had evidence in the form of WhatsApp messages to show that the gift was something that the girl's family had insisted upon. So most people and their families don't take such precautions. So it's a huge problem, and as I said earlier, we are on the brink of a mental health crisis that is being brought about because of all of these cases that are being filed left, right, and center.
Right. Now, when you talk about 498A, we are looking at criminalizing a marital law. And the last time you and I were also speaking offline, we said, why bring in the state, why bringing the police into a marriage unless there is absolute evidence of physical violence on either spouses? However, as you rightly defined, 498A can be anything. Cruelty can be defined as anything. I mean, you not saying good night to your wife every night is also in a way of cruelty, if you look at it in a very subjective way. As a lawyer, what do you think, are the changes that we should bring into the system? Because obviously there is one whole aspect of the genuine women who suffer dowry problems. We are not denying that women suffer dowry problems. But then it also becomes like a tool in the hand of a lot of maybe disgruntled wives who want to use it as, a threat to the man to, make him fall in line. So is there any suggestion you would like to give as a lawmaker or from the legal background?
See, I think you were very rightly pointed out that nobody in their right mind is going to defend something like physical cruelty, right? If there is physical cruelty, then arrest should take place irrespective of who has perpetrated the physical cruelty. So on this, I think everybody is very clear. There is nobody here who's saying that if the husband beats his wife, then the cops should not get involved because it's ghar ka mamla. That's a very regressive way of thinking. Having said that, we really need to ensure, and maybe the Supreme Court can someday pass a judgment in this regard, because what happens under common law is that a lot of times these statutes are drafted in such a way that there is a lot of scope for judicial interpretation. That's just how common law has worked when it was developed, right? In the United Kingdom, not the United Kingdom, mostly England, because Scotland followed Scots law. So this is a big problem, because in effect what's happening is that this IO at the CAW cell, at the concerned CAW cell, is the one who is telling you whether it's cruelty or not. And I don't think those people are equipped to decide that. And the other problem is that there is this old saying that if the only tool that you have is a hammer, then every problem will come across as a nail to you. So this is what is happening, because you have all of these cops, and the only thing that they feel works in these circumstances is to threaten the guy's family into settling on terms that are not at all favorable, because the guy's family, of course, is really scared to go through a trial. Let's be very clear. They have to spend a lot of money on lawyers, and their reputation is out. Their reputation is going to be literally taken to the cleaners. And then, as far as guys are concerned, there is also the stigma. There was this person I know very well, and he's also somebody I'm representing. He was married to the daughter of someone who's a big shot CEO of a very, very prominent public sector undertaking. And this guy had a job that paid more than a crore a year. And because of this complaint that was filed against him, he lost his job. And because he has lost his job, now he cannot provide the maintenance that his wife demands. And so this is a huge issue. And most guys are scared of going to jail. That's just how it is. Because even if you go to jail for a day or 2 days when you've not committed a crime, then this is something that stays with you. The stigma stays with you. The shame stays with you that you had to stay with criminals or to share lodgings with them. So there is a very human aspect to it. We should not look at ourselves as members of some adversarial tribes as if, okay, you guys are all that if you are speaking out for in favor of, let's say, a man who has been wrong, it doesn't mean that you are some sort of a regressive person who doesn't appreciate all the good things that have happened in the world because of feminism. So it's not like that. If there is a significant section of our society whose mental health is getting affected, then it's an issue that concerns all of us because we need as many people as possible to be productive members of our society. And when a case like this happens, when a case like this drags on, most people don't even have the money to make this one time settlement. This is also something that we have to keep in mind. There are some people who are affluent, yes. There are some people who are not so affluent who have to scrounge the money from all across, from all over, and they have to take loans, mortgage their property, jewelry, and everything. And hence, it's very, very important to change the procedure. First of all, I do feel that we can draw a very, very clear distinction between cases where an actual violence happens and cases wherein violence does not happen. So if violence has happened, if there is a medical legal case, in my opinion, the guy definitely needs to be sent to jail, and we have to make sure that bail is not granted in such cases. Having said that, in cases where violence has not happened, why should we make the process the punishment? Let the trial continue. We can set a fast track course, and if somebody is convicted, then they need to go to jail. But I will add a caveat here before or that the first thing we need to do before all of these procedural changes that I suggested is to ensure that the law is worded more precisely. Because right now the definition is such, and as you rightly pointed out, anything can be cruelty. If let us say my clothes are strewn all over the floor, that can also be cruelty, right? So that's something. All of these things need to be taken on board because, as I stated earlier, it's a huge mental health crisis, and like there are families that have been destroyed because of this, and I know of many cases these days where men are saying that they don't really want to get married and live-in relationships serve them well because at least these sections are not available to their disgruntled partners, and we cannot fault the partners also in such cases when the law is something that is practiced in the manner that it is practiced, because ultimately if you hire a lawyer, the lawyer will be there to get you the best possible outcome and you will go by the advice of the lawyer. That's what most people do. But as members of society, we need to make sure that the law is less susceptible to misuse.
Right. What I was saying is, I've also come across certain individuals, working for MNCs, and the minute a 498A kind of a criminal case is filed on them by their wives, one is you have to declare to your organization because they will ask you what are the criminal cases pending against you. Now, every organization views these cases very, very differently. So, while you would want to show them the law that, you're not a convicted criminal, you're just an accused, but still there are a lot of people who have been asked to quit their jobs, or they've been harassed to an extent that they have themselves been forced to resign and leave the job because of certain situations like this. So you're very right when you say, we need to kind of tweak the law in a manner that, let the trial continue if there is an issue, but let us not, kind of criminalize the whole
I
thing.
think more importantly, I do feel that a lot of people who are targeted, right, are in the early years of marriage, which means that they are in the prime of their earning lives, right? So, and as I stated earlier, if you make sure that this person is thrown out of his job, then he's not going to be able to provide for you during the course of the litigation and even after the divorce because he won't have any money left. And even from the point of view of the economy, it makes more sense to ensure that this guy keeps his job and then he contributes to society by way of taxes or whatever, like economic value that he brings to society. But what this section does is that in its misguided zeal, it there are so many people who are then rendered criminals, and because of this tag that is put on them, because of this whatever stigma that is occasioned, they are they are reduced to a husk of their former selves, and that's deplorable and pathetic, and it's a crying shame for us as a society. uh, there is this recent case that I had taken up, and I have to say this gentleman is 29 years old, not even 30 years old, and he hasn't been able to sleep for months, and he was thankfully self-employed, but he's not been able to work, and it means that he has not been able to earn. Now there are so many people who are working under him. He was an entrepreneur, and all of them have had their lives have had their economic futures endangered, and this is like not just counterproductive. I think what this section does is, in its present form and in the manner in which it is practiced, it's just a lot of vapid virtue signaling, which is bringing no value to our society at all.
True. And also, when we oppose dowry so strongly, this is kind of a reverse dowry in a sense that, you're using this law because ultimately, how do these cases get settled? I'm sure you are also aware that once the money is paid by the boy's side, all the cruelty is forgotten, all the so-called, harassment is forgotten. So does this really make sense? Because a lot of people, by shame, they do not even want to go to court to fight it out. They'll say, okay, let's just pay up. We don't want our names to be, get into this whole criminal, we don't want to be called criminals. So let's just pay up, settle the matter, end the chapter, and let the boy move on. So how do you look at this reverse dowry phenomenon, which is now very, very rampant in society?
I think it's really deplorable. I am not, and I'll repeat, I am not for even a moment saying that there are no genuine cases of cruelty. There are many genuine cases of cruelty, but most of these cases are filed just so you can extract some money. And it's more pernicious than reverse dowry because, I mean, you can just demand anything. And if you make a demand and then the guy's family cannot meet it, then the matter, of course, is going to go to criminal trial. And also, the other strange thing is that although it's not a compoundable offense under the IPC, in practice, what happens after money is paid is that the guy's family or the guy files a quashing petition, and then the other side comes to court and doesn't oppose it. So even though it's not a compoundable offense, it works as a compoundable offense. So I really do feel that we need to do away with this virtue signaling. It's really not needed. In no other country are there provisions like this, wherein such great cruelty is perpetrated uh, as far as people's mental health is concerned. And I think that's, I mean, we keep talking about mental health of athletes and film stars, but it's the common people here whose mental health is getting very, very badly affected. And what I don't understand is we are not talking about it. And if you do talk about it, then you are branded as some sort of a regressive person, and that's really and that's really bad.
You absolutely, you nailed it. When you say whenever we talk about men, you sound as if you're regressive, you're patriarchal for some reason. But when you talk about women and their rights and their challenges, you are progressive. Uh,
And just add one more thing. I'll add one more thing. As far as I am concerned, I would like to believe that that feminism has been a force for the good in this world, right? You bring women into the economic, into the workforce, and make them uh, work members of the, and make them contribute to the economy, and enable them rather to contribute to the economy. That's a very, very good thing. And you make sure that they get reproductive autonomy, and that's also something that feminists have achieved. You give women equal access to public spaces. But what you forget is that, let's say a case is filed against a man, and it's not just the man who will be arrayed as the party. Let's be very clear. You will array that man's mother. If at all the man has sisters, then those would also, those sister or sisters, as the case may be, would also be arrayed in the complaint, right? So ultimately, it's not just having a bad effect on the mental health of the men, it's also having a bad effect on the mental health of the women of the guy's family. So it's not just about men, it's about ensuring that the whole family does, which includes women, does not have to go through this mental, go through this torture.
Absolutely. And why should laws for women only be for daughter-in-laws? I mean, as you said, a mother is also a woman and a sister of a husband is also a woman. So,
So I know of a case personally, like I just repeat, I'll just mention it. You had this guy who's this on 29-year-old entrepreneur. His sister has been living in Netherlands for the past 3 years, and the only time she came to India over the past 3 years, also because of COVID, is during her brother's wedding, and she stayed here for exactly, I think, 5 or 6 days. And what this complaint states is that she used to call her mother, that's the guy, that's the guy's, that's the woman's mother-in-law, and she used to instigate her to commit acts of cruelty. So
well,
this is,
we all know somewhere, these FIR drafts are also a kind of copy-paste exercise.
it's
And
not just a copy-paste exercise. It's something that people hire lawyers to do, and the lawyer has done a good job. I have to say the lawyer has done a good job, but as members of civil society, we should somewhere just pause and think as to what we are doing,
absolutely
or what we are enabling rather.
true. So, when we sum up these whole things, I think the crux of the matter is legal aspect is one side. You have lawyers to fight these cases. But when you talk about mental aspect, like generally you will have men and the families who have only visited a police station for their passport application. Now, families like these, suddenly if they see police walking up to your house or you getting a call, मैं police station से बोल रहा हूँ, आपकी wife ने complaint कर दी है. How should men and these families react? Because they are completely shocked. First of all, they're not even aware of these laws unless they get that first call from the police station.
I think it's really what we need to keep in mind is two or three things. First of all, before the marriage, whenever you're exchanging any gifts, and in India, of course, marriage is a family affair, right? As far as my marriage is concerned, I just took a ferry to Denmark. There were two witnesses, and I signed a couple of documents, and that was it because my wife is German. But that's not how marriages work in India. So the whole family is involved. So the first thing is that whatever exchange of gifts has to be made, it has to, has to be, you should maintain a paper trail. That's an absolute must. And that paper trail should clearly contain a declaration on the behalf of the wife's family saying that no gifts were no gifts were exchanged or no gifts were given owing to any pressure that was put on them by the guy's side. So I think this much is an absolute non-negotiable, and if you don't do it, then I guess then you have no right to complain when the opposing side's lawyer files the complaint. So this
Right.
is something that one should do.
When
This is
things are going well, when two families are coming together for a happy union, a lot of people will say, "Oh, how can we do this? You are trying to spoil the relations from day one. How can you go and ask the girl's side, Acha, you sign this paper because maybe we have a doubt that you might misuse the law in future." So some might say this is not practical, but of course, the other side to it is you need to be aware. Maybe if not sign, at least have some kind of an evidence trail that there was no dowry exchange between the two parties. Whatever was there was a mutual, gifts, customary gifts that you give each other, and there was no force or nobody was pressured to give whatever was given in that particular marriage.
I think I would like to make a point here, and I think this is something that the viewers can perhaps think about. Our society is very much a pre-industrial society, even though like we try to move towards a more industrialized economy. Our society is a pre-industrial society, in as much as your family is the most important institution in your life, right? And when a marriage happens, it's not just the union between the man and the woman, it's a union between two families. That's just how this institution of marriage works in society. However, our laws are drafted on the assumption that all of these institutions perpetrate and institutionalize cruelty against the woman, right? So this is a major dichotomy. There is a phrase, एक मुहावरा होता है हिंदी में, आधा तीतर आधा बटेर. So this is what we are at this stage, right? In the West, marriage is something that it's mostly a relationship between the man and the woman. The families are not involved except on some festive occasions. So even though these institutions that we have in our society have stood the test of time, and nobody is saying that there were no instances of cruelty. There were instances of cruelty, and for that we need to make sure that there are laws. And I do feel that even the laws that we had in the past were enough to take care of these instances of cruelty. I'm not going to say that these institutions were totally flawless, but they did serve our needs at different points of time in our history. And as I said earlier, these institutions have not been completely done away with. But the law is such that it criminalizes everything that was unique to these institutions and everything that was essential to these institutions. That's what the law is. Because the law presumes that if a woman gets married and she goes to live with the family of the man, and I'm not saying I'm not passing any comment as to whether I feel that this particular practice is something that is desirable or not. That's not the object of our discussion. What I am saying is that the law is automatically working on the presumption that what is going to happen to her is that a lot of cruelty will be perpetrated upon her, and then the guy's family will kill her or torture her for dowry. So this is something that
The law
families also need to keep in
it
mind.
just presumes that the woman is the victim. The minute she goes to the police station or files a case, the whole presumption is she is the victim and man is the perpetrator.
अरे पुलिस स्टेशन तो आपने आगे की बात बोल. The presumption that the law operates on is that the moment she gets married and goes to live with the guy's family, because let's be very clear, like in India, people don't move out of their house, parents' house, when they're 18. This is something that no law can make you do. The reason why it happened in the West was this rise of individualism, which has its roots in the black death that stalked Europe when there were no families left, so everybody had to take care of themselves. So thankfully, nothing like the black death ever happened in India. So we are still really attached to our family, right? There is this institution, right, of arranged marriage that exists in our society. And I think more than 90% of the marriages in this country are still arranged, 93 and 94%. And how that institution works is that the girl goes to the guy's house. The problem is that although this institution is something that still exists, everything else about this institution, its essentials, like have been criminalized, right? And the assumption is that if the girl is going to the boy's house, then there will be cruelty which is perpetrated upon her. So even in cases where there is no cruelty, somehow the law assumes कि जो हो रहा है, जो default है वो cruelty. So people also need to realize this कि भाई this institution as on date doesn't work in the way that it used to work. So we have to also adapt our behavior accordingly, because if we don't adapt to changing times, then it will be very difficult. And I, for one, believe that in 90 to 95% of the cases, there is no cruelty, right? In 5% of the cases, yes, there is cruelty. But because of this, your 5% of the cases and whatever is happening, you cannot criminalize or stigmatize the rest of the 95% who just want to live a normal, happy life. And as I mentioned earlier, we are still not like the West, where children strike out on their own the day they turn 18. This is not how it works. And in this country, like this act of rebellion against your father, which is a rite of passage in Western societies. You read their myths, right? Uranus kills Cronus and Zeus kills Uranus. So we don't have such a mythology in this country, such mythologies in this country. In this country, our hero is Lord Ram, who goes to the forest because his father has, granted a boon to his stepmother. So we also need to understand that our society is definitely not like Western societies. I'm not saying that we are bad or they are good. That's a long discussion. But as of now, we are stuck in a kind of a limbo where you have some people who are otherwise really well intentioned, and they are behind the drafting of all of these laws, and they are telling us that look, whatever you're doing is criminal. And while society continues the way it has continued for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that's just what has been prevalent here. So we have to keep all of these things in mind, but I do feel that discretion is the better part of valor. And even if everything is going well, even if you think that the girl's family is very good and the girl is really nice and she's just like your daughter, it doesn't mean that you should, you know, uh, let your guard down, because that's a fatal mistake. And it's like you have to hope for the best, but simultaneously you have to prepare for the worst, that the marriage will implode and lawyers will come into the picture. So yeah.
Absolutely. And is there any way, Raghav, you want to contribute to this movement by, helping such men who are in distress? If somebody wants to reach out to you, is there any way you can guide them in this?
I think I'm more than happy to do that. My Twitter direct messages are open. I'm happy to help. But I really do feel that some organizations need to get together, and they don't have to be like men's rights organizations and stuff like that. Like some organizations that want to work for the betterment of society need to come together, and petition needs to be filed before the Supreme Court or the concerned High Court for a declaration that these laws have to be read in a gender neutral manner. Because as I stated earlier, when you go after when the woman's family decides to go after the man's family, it's not only something that affects the man, it affects the rest of his family also, which includes women
True.
who are
And
not.
since you mentioned it shouldn't be about men's rights, I must share that a lot of NGOs who are working in this space, they are in fact named as Save Indian Family. So it's not about the men; it is about the entire family. I mean, it can be family from both ends. Nobody wants to break a marriage, So whatever best that can be done to save the institution, to save the union. If it doesn't work out, of course, it's better to part ways. But it cannot be on the other extreme also, where a very very frivolous kind of thing gets filed under 498A as cruelty.
It's not just 498A, like there are a gamut of other sections that are misused. For example, you have the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act that is also weaponized, although it has only civil consequences, unless, of course, you violate an order that is given by a judge under that act. It's very difficult. And I think, as I stated earlier, like the institution of marriage in this country is changing really rapidly. And like it or not, people who are making these decisions as to where men and women, as to who men and women should marry, are the parents of those men and women. That's just how it is, right? I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but just because I feel that there are certain aspects of society that are not good, those aspects are not going to dissolve themselves. They're not going to disappear. That's just how it is. And a big problem is that these parents of the men and women who are of marriageable age operate on the assumption that whatever worked for them and their parents is also going to work in this generation. That's just not how it works, and it's really tough. And this might have been a well-intentioned intervention, but I think it is leading to mental unprecedented detrimental mental health consequences for a lot of people.
And I think one way we can address this is more and more people need to come out and speak about this. We need to be vocal about this. There's no shame in talking about issues which are related to men. And I think
Yeah.
that is what you have also, volunteered to do as of now.
I think what people need in this situation is that, I mean, first of all, most men don't talk when something like this happens because they feel a sense of shame. उनको लगता है यार, it's a bit like a woman who's sexually assaulted. So she feels this sense of shame, right? So she's not talking about it, and not talking about something like this just makes it worse. So I think just like Alcoholics Anonymous, we need to form groups like this in every city, in every town, so that men can talk about the mental health. Not just men, the whole families, including the women, need to find a safe space where they can talk about all these mental health issues that they face. And it's I think what most people need is this sense of a support group where people can look out for each other, because ultimately lawyers you can find, right? If you have money, you'll be able to hire a good lawyer. That's not the issue. The issue is whether the more important issue is whether you can really deal with this crisis when it is upon your head. I think
On a
that's the
mental
more important thing.
That's true. So, on that note, thank you so much, Raghav, for taking out time. And I wish you a very happy 2022 in advance. And we look forward to chatting more on this issue whenever we can.
Same to you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.